Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
You guys send us so much interesting stuff. And this time, we're really diving into the core of how we learn. Like, how do we actually learn and grow? And the material you sent, it's all about formative assessment and this idea of self-regulated learning, which sounds kind of jargony,
Right.
but it's really fascinating. And the big takeaway, the thing we want to unpack today is that assessment, it's not just about texts and grades. It's really about using it to drive learning. Like it's a tool, not
Yeah.
the end goal.
It is, yeah.
And the way we can use it to really become, the managers of our own education. Like we're in charge.
Exactly.
So we're going to go through all this great stuff you sent and hopefully kind of pull out these key ideas that maybe even surprise you a little bit about how we can use this to become lifelong learners, like really equip ourselves
Yeah, absolutely.
for the long haul.
And I think what's really interesting is that when we think about assessment, so often we jump right to tests and grades.
Right, exactly.
But the material you've all sent,
Yeah.
it shows us that it's so much more dynamic, It's really tied in with this idea of how we develop as learners.
Yeah.
And that's self-regulated learning.
Self-regulated learning.
So we're going to be looking at how, if we use assessment in this ongoing, really supportive way, it can give you, the listener, that power to take control of your own learning.
Yeah, and that's huge.
Which is so important, right?
Absolutely.
For navigating everything that life kind of throws at you.
It is, and one of the things that struck me is just how much research there is on this. Like one of the articles I was reading, it had like almost 200 references, like 200 other studies
Wow.
that it was pulling from. So it's not just like one person's opinion.
No.
It's really like a synthesis of work from all these different fields, educational psychology and social cognitive theory,
Yeah.
sociocultural perspectives. It's a really well-established
A huge body of work.
and important area.
Absolutely. And here's something that I think will really grab everyone's attention.
Yeah.
The way that feedback is designed and how it's delivered. It's not just a small thing. It can actually fundamentally change how you learn and even what motivates you to learn.
Totally.
So we'll be digging into how powerful that interaction can be.
Yeah, okay, so let's get down to it. What is formative assessment? Because I think when most of us hear assessment, we think, exams, report cards.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really important place to start, I think, because
Right.
formative assessment, it's not a test. It's not about just, getting a score at the end.
Right.
And it's definitely not those kind of interim tests that are just trying to predict your final result.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead, think about it more as a process, a continuous process. And the main purpose is really to support, both the teaching, but crucially, your learning as it's actually happening.
It's in the flow of things.
Yeah, it's happening in the flow of learning itself, not just like at the end.
Yeah.
And it has these two kind of main goals that are often called assessment for learning, or AFL,
Okay.
and assessment as learning, AAL.
Got it.
So AFL, that's all about keeping an eye on your progress towards whatever it is you're trying to learn. And it's about kind of figuring out where you are right now. What's that gap between where you are now and where you need to be?
Okay.
And that happens through things like, teachers sharing really clear goals, asking questions that really get you thinking,
Right.
and giving you really targeted feedback along the way.
Okay. And assessment as learning, that sounds like it puts, more of the onus on the learner to kind of manage their own.
Yeah, assessment as learning
Mhm.
really brings you into the process. So it involves you reflecting on your learning, both on your own but also with others.
Okay.
And it's a process where you're setting your own learning goals.
Yeah.
You're understanding what you're aiming for, how you'll know you've gotten there,
Yeah.
and you're actively thinking about your own learning.
Yeah.
Through discussions and through giving and receiving feedback from yourself and from others.
So these two things, AFL and AAIL, they're not like separate. They work together.
They are very deeply connected. As you actively participate in this process, using both feedback you get and developing your own ability to think about your learning,
Yeah.
you become more and more self-regulated.
Right.
You get better at understanding how you learn best and what steps you need to take to improve.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, one of the points that I thought was really interesting in the outline was about the philosophical roots of formative assessment, which is post-structuralism.
Right.
Now, I know that might sound a bit academic, but how does that actually relate to what's happening when you're trying to learn something?
Yeah, it can seem a bit abstract.
Okay.
But the core ideas of post-structuralist thought, they really influence what makes formative assessment work.
Okay.
So think about things like, everyone having a voice.
Hmm.
making sure that different perspectives are heard, that you have these open discussions, and that you're trying to reach a shared understanding. These are all really important in this kind of formative assessment environment.
Okay, and how does that actually translate into, a classroom or just a learning situation?
Well, what it tries to do is move away from that very traditional kind of top-down way of teaching,
Right,
where it's
yeah.
all about the teacher. The teacher is the source of knowledge,
Right.
by encouraging discussion and collaboration. It really lowers what's called the psychological risk for learners.
Okay.
You feel more comfortable to get involved, share your ideas, even make mistakes, which, we all know is a really crucial part of learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
So think of it this way. Instead of just the teacher's voice being the right answer, formative assessment is creating that space where your ideas
Yeah.
and your understanding, even if it's still developing, are valued and contribute to that overall learning.
Right, so it's about making it a safer space.
Exactly, yeah, a safer space to explore and learn. And the sources even give a really interesting example. They compare the Danish Folkskole system, which really emphasizes open conversation, you
Wow.
know, talking about learning as a way to understand how students are doing, with the U.S. system, which often focuses more on standardized testing and written assignments.
Right, right.
So that Danish approach, it really exemplifies those post-structuralist values.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so let's move on to something that I think we all have a lot of experience with, which is feedback.
Yeah,
We all know it's important, but the sources really emphasized a particular kind of power that it has in formative assessment.
absolutely. This idea of formative interaction is really central here.
Okay.
It's that back and forth between something external that happens. So a question you're asked, a task you're given, feedback from a teacher or peer, and then how you internally process that.
Yeah.
That's what helps your understanding evolve.
And what makes it formative?
Well, a really important part is clarity. Sharing those learning goals up front. So you really understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And clearly explaining, the criteria for success. That's all really essential.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what the target is, the feedback is much less helpful.
Right. It's like trying to hit a target when you don't know where the target is.
Exactly, exactly. And the sources actually talk about these different types of questions. Feed up, feedback, and feed forward. And, these are really designed to help you regulate your own learning.
Right. So feed up, like where are we going? That's like the goal.
Exactly.
Feedback, how are we doing right now? Checking your progress.
Yeah,
Feed forward, what are the next steps? It's like a
precisely.
continuous loop.
And feedback can also happen, in real time. Like when a teacher responds to your answer straight away.
Right.
That's what we call synchronous feedback.
Synchronous. Okay.
Or it can happen later. Like, written comments on a piece of work. That's asynchronous.
Asynchronous. Okay.
And the sources even point out that real-time feedback, especially in things that are really engaging, like computer games,
Right.
can be really motivating because you get that immediate sense
Right.
of whether you're on the right track or not.
Totally.
And it's not just about getting feedback from others. There's also this idea of internal feedback, which comes from your own engagement with the task,
Yeah.
how you're monitoring your understanding. And it's important to remember that when you receive feedback, you don't just absorb it directly. You interpret it based on, what you already know and believe.
Right.
So the same piece of feedback might be interpreted in different ways by two different people.
Absolutely. And that's why this feedback needs to be so carefully crafted and really needs to support self-efficacy, which is, that belief in your ability to
Yeah.
succeed.
And it's about giving you the right support at the right time so that you feel in control of your learning journey. It's giving you that boost to kind of push you just beyond your current understanding to develop those new ways of tackling challenges.
Like that perfect kind of boost.
Exactly, that perfect boost. That we often refer to as scaffolding.
Scaffolding.
And this links to another really key idea, which is volition.
Okay, volition.
So volition is about having that self-control and those strategies to stay focused and keep going, even when things get tough or you start to doubt yourself.
Right.
So formative assessment is really aiming to help you develop those positive strategies so that you stay really involved and engaged in your own learning.
Yeah, it's all about making learning like a active and self-directed
Absolutely.
process for the learner. Now, another thing that came up was this idea of tacit knowledge, which is
Right.
another one of those terms that
Sure,
maybe
needs a little explanation. Okay, let's break it down. Tacit knowledge is basically the knowledge that you have that's really difficult to explain. So it includes Like your underlying motivations,
Hmm.
your ideas, beliefs, even skills, things that are so deeply ingrained in your actions, and the specific situations that you're in. And often it's knowledge that you're not even consciously aware of.
Okay.
It's that kind of knowledge where you know how to do it,
Right.
but you can't really explain it.
It's like that know-how that's almost intuitive.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
Formative assessment really tries to bring this tacit knowledge
Hmm.
to the surface, into the open. So through actively participating in discussions, reflecting on your experiences, you're encouraged to make those hidden understandings more explicit.
Okay, and why is that important? To make that tacit knowledge more explicit.
Because once you can articulate it, you can examine it, you can share it with others,
Hmm.
and you can build upon it.
Yeah.
So the goal isn't just to extract knowledge from you, it's to create what the sources call a knowledge culture. So it's an environment where learning and sharing what you know are really actively encouraged.
Right. So it's building like a community of learners where everyone's understanding can
Precisely, yeah.
kind of feed into it.
And that tacit knowledge comes from experience,
Hmm.
and it forms the basis for future learning is really, really important for lifelong growth.
Okay.
The sources even mentioned how this idea is explored in things like how organizations innovate, in like Japanese literature,
Wow.
and even how it's used in diverse fields like the U.S. military and even universities. So formative assessment is bringing this focus
Hmm.
on knowledge culture and the value of learning from experience to, younger learners in school
Right.
settings.
So it's not just about absorbing information, it's about making your own like internal understanding accessible.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to self-regulated learning, SRL. We kind of touched on it, but how would we define it more formally?
Okay, so self-regulated learning, SRL, it's really an active and constructive process where you set goals for your learning and you actively try to monitor, regulate, and control your own thinking, your cognition, as well as your motivation and behavior to reach those goals.
Right. So you're in the driver's seat.
You are in the driver's seat of your own educational journey. And the sources highlight some key points that I think most researchers agree on about SRL.
Okay.
So first, it involves you actually participating in the learning process.
Okay.
Second, you have this ability to kind of observe, manage, direct different aspects of yourself in your learning. Third, there are always some kind of standards or goals that you're comparing your progress against. And finally, SRL is a dynamic interplay between your own personal characteristics, the context you're learning in, and how you're actually performing.
Okay. So what are the kind of strategies that people who are good at self-regulated learning tend to use?
Yeah, well, they often use what are called metacognitive strategies,
Oh.
which is basically thinking about your own thinking. So this can include things like, talking yourself through a problem, assessing your own understanding, and even, giving yourself rewards for making progress or identifying areas where you need to improve.
Right. And it's not just how we think, right? The outline mentions 4 different areas
That's right, yeah.
of learning that can be self-regulated.
So the first is cognitive and metacognitive strategies,
Okay.
like practicing information, organizing key ideas, and connecting what you're learning to what you already know. The second is how actively you participate in the learning process. The third is your motivation. How do you keep your interest up? And the fourth, which comes from more socio-cultural perspective, is your learning environment. So how you interact with the things around you and the people in that environment to support your learning.
Right. So SRL isn't just something you're born with, it's something that can be.
Absolutely. And that is a crucial point. It's not a fixed trait. It's a set of skills and approaches that can be nurtured and improved over time.
Right. And that's where those specific goals of formative assessment come in.
Exactly.
So how do the goals of formative assessment actually help you develop these SRL skills?
Well, they're specifically designed to encourage certain SRL strategies. And the sources provide a really useful chart that actually maps out this connection.
Okay, let's look at an example. Like, what's one goal of formative assessment, and how does that actually help you become a better self-regulated learner?
Okay, so take the goal of making learning intentions and success criteria really clear. That's a big part of AFL.
Right.
That directly helps you develop SRL strategies like setting your own learning goals and planning how you're going to achieve them. If you understand where you're headed, you can better figure out how to get there.
Right. What's another example?
Okay, another goal is using really effective questioning in the classroom. So this encourages you to actively seek help when you're struggling, which is a key SRL skill.
Yeah.
But it also encourages peer learning because you discuss and try to understand things together, so you're learning from each other.
Right. Okay, and what about on the assessment as learning side?
Okay, so one of the goals of AAL is to give you opportunities to kind of become more aware of your own thinking. So you develop that self-knowledge, and you do that by, evaluating your own work. So this is fostering SRL strategies like self-evaluation and reflecting on your progress. When you're encouraged to check your own work, identify your own mistakes. You're developing that crucial ability to monitor your own understanding.
Okay, so it's very intentionally like designing learning experiences to build those
Exactly.
self-management skills.
It's intentional design. And it's a two-way street. The goals of formative assessment encourage you to develop these SRL skills.
Mm,
But if you're already more self-regulated, you're also better able to engage with and benefit from formative assessment.
right. Now the outline moves on to these four kind of essential factors of knowledge production,
All right.
which are internalization, environment, interaction, and experience. How do those kind of form the foundation? For the theory of formative assessment.
Okay, so these four factors really represent the bedrock of how we understand learning in this formative context. So let's start with internalization. I think a really key idea here is the role of what you already know. So your prior knowledge. Learning, it's not like pouring something into an empty container. It's an internal exchange
Hmm.
between new information and what's already in your head. So your existing schematic knowledge.
Right, so you make sense of new things by connecting it to what you already understand.
Exactly.
And that process of building understanding, it's
Yeah.
always ongoing. It's constantly changing as you have these new experiences.
Right. And I think when we talk about environment,
Mm,
it's important to make that distinction between learning and development, like the psychologist Vygotsky pointed out.
yeah.
Learning is about gaining new skills, but development involves these changes in
Yeah.
your underlying ways of thinking.
Right, so
Thinking changes.
your actual thinking changes.
Yeah.
And Vygotsky's idea of the zone of proximal development, or ZPD.
ZP. It's not just about what you can do with help. It's about those thinking abilities that are just
Mm.
starting to develop. So good learning kind of pushes you into that ZPD. It helps you develop those new ways of thinking
Okay.
and the knowledge you already have,
Uh-huh.
whether you remember it consciously or it's brought to the surface by, thinking about a task or talking to someone. That's the starting point for working towards those formative assessment goals.
Yeah.
And developing your self-regulated learning.
Right.
And Vygotsky also emphasized that you and your social and cultural surroundings, they're inseparable. We can't really understand how you learn by just looking at you in isolation. It's that interaction with the world around you that
Yeah.
shapes your learning.
Absolutely. And that leads us to that third factor, interaction.
Yeah.
There's that constant back and forth between you and your environment. The sources mention epistemic actions,
Yes.
and those are these conscious things you do to kind of regulate your own learning, like having those discussions or organizing your study space, like
Right. So you're
that.
shaping your environment to help you learn.
Yeah.
And then finally, experience, like your own lived experience.
Yeah,
That's the tacit knowledge we talked about earlier. It's so fundamental to how you learn
absolutely.
and how you kind of make sense of new information. And formative assessment really recognizes and values
It does.
that lived experience as a part of the process. So with all this information coming at you,
Yeah.
feedback, new ideas, how do you actually process it
Yeah.
effectively in a formative assessment setting?
Well, the first thing is that information about what you're supposed to be learning and how you'll be assessed needs to be really clear. You need to understand those standards, the criteria for success. And then the sources talk about how we go from, data to information to knowledge. So data only becomes information when it's put in a context. That gives it meaning. And information becomes knowledge when you reflect on it. So you think about how it relates to your own experiences, what you might do with it.
Yeah.
So reflection seems to be really important here. Absolutely. And the sources also touch on how technology, like learning on your phone or tablet, can be used in formative assessment to kind of make learning happen in those real world situations
Yeah.
and even help you become more self-regulated through things like giving you hints when you get stuck and encouraging you to think about why you made a mistake.
Right.
So it can be really useful for managing your own learning.
It can, especially when it's designed with these formative ideas in mind.
Yeah.
And the sources really emphasize that. The theory behind formative assessment, it really sits at this intersection between, how you think as an individual
Hmm.
and how your social and cultural environment kind of shapes your learning.
Right. It's both.
It's both. It recognizes that becoming a self-regulated learner, it's not just an internal thing. It's influenced by your interactions with others and the world around you as well.
Yeah. And importantly, it kind of moves away from comparing you to others. when giving you feedback.
It does,
Mm.
and focuses instead on your own progress against those clear goals.
Right. So it's about your learning journey, not about being better than everyone else.
Exactly. It's about your learning journey.
Now, the outline talks about theoretical synthesis, specifically indirect and direct learning.
Okay.
How do those kind of fit into formative assessment?
Well, indirect learning, learning by watching others, that's really important. You learn a lot by observing what others do. And in a formative assessment classroom, the teacher acts as a key role model. So they show you how to have those productive discussions, how to connect new ideas to what you already know, even how to, like, ask good questions, like, an expert in that field. So the teacher isn't just lecturing, they're actually showing you how to learn.
Right. So they're modeling those
Okay.
kind of conversations and reflective habits
That
that you
do.
should be developing yourself.
And the sources even point out that you need to be explicitly taught and shown examples of how to work well in groups for things like peer learning and giving each other feedback.
Yeah. So it's not just something that's going to happen organic.
It needs that structure,
Yeah.
and teachers play a vital role in modeling how to reflect on learning and encouraging you to take responsibility for your progress. It's a very active role for the teacher.
Right.
They're guiding and showing you the way.
Yeah. Okay.
And the sources also describe this kind of, step-by-step process for how self-regulated learning develops. First you observe others, then you try out their strategies. And then finally you can, like, consciously manage your own learning.
Okay.
So the teacher acts as that guide in the early stages, providing that scaffolding, what Vygotsky called scaffolding, within your zone of proximal development, so that
Yeah.
place where you can make progress with the right support.